Hey everyone, how's it going? Hopefully well, doing okay myself. Today I want to talk about an act that has been around for some time, quite a while, and as usual in my videos, I like to talk about people who are, distinctive and if not definitive or both. Um, and this group right here, more or less, it's been one person with other people involved at the same time. I want to talk about nervous system. Now, you may have heard about nervous system before. Nervous system has been around since at least the early 90s. Um, may or may not have heard the releases that came out on Electric Orgasm Records, which was their label in the late 90s. Um, could be more well known for that stuff, but maybe not, because I'm not sure. It wasn't, at least in the 90s when I was buying vinyl, it wasn't easy for me to find everything that I was looking for. And I remember trying to find Nervous System 12 inches, and they were very hard to get. The first one I ever heard was Zones on Psychedelic, and this is 1997 right here. And this is a very excellent 12-inch. And if you haven't heard Zones and its B-side Initiation, I would recommend that you listen to this, because this is quite distinctive. It's very unique. It's very heavy. There's a bit of a deep melodic aspect to it. This 12-inch in particular is fantastic. So, it's not on Electric Orgasm, it's on Psychic Daily. I just want to preface this video by talking about, these aren't the main focus I want to talk about. I want to talk about, just real quick, these are the Nervous System and Ether, this of course being Unknown Controllers, which is still them. Nervous System and Ether 12 inches released on Electric Orgasm, which was Nervous System's label that he procured to release music. There was never a Nervous System album released on Electric Orgasm. A little bit of history. Well, maybe not. Let me get into the music about these 12 inches just for a moment quickly. These are not your typical verse, chorus, verse 12 inches right here. This is very deep, very heavy, very distinctive, deep psychedelic madness. These are very psychedelic. They stand out not just as 12 inches, but also as rarities, because Electric Orgasm is such a short-lived label that they probably only live in the hands of collectors, such as myself. Again, not your typical verse, chorus, verse, deep psychedelic trance either, but not psychedelic trance in the typical sense. These are kind of like a less is more kind of a thing. They're very dark, and the driving force behind these would be one or two very simple, heavy laden synth progressions that persist throughout the whole track, where there would be, it would kind of build up a little bit, there'd be a drop and some sort of psychedelic madness, so that it would pick right back up into where it left off, which is interesting because you don't hear a whole lot of music that does that. Normally it'll do something, drop, and then it'll change and pick up into something else, drop, and maybe go back to what it did before, or do something else. That's not what's going on with these things. These are very heavily laden narratives that persist throughout in a very logical, linear manner. And I know I talk a lot about things like narrative, but that's important in music, because when music has a narrative, much like when, I mean, of course, a story would have a narrative too. You know, a story could deviate from the narrative and go off on tangents and non sequiturs and things like that. You know, much in the way that music can too. You know, like the drop, especially like the drop or the breakdown in these 12 inches in particular, are a very unexpected, twisted non sequitur, but then it goes right back into the narrative that you were listening to before it dropped. And again, there's not a whole lot of music out there that's done what these are doing, and that's one of the reasons that I like them, is because they're very heavy, they're very distinctive. There's lots of twisted madness in there, and I'm going to gloat and show you that I have a white label, handwritten Electric Orgasm #1. So, haha to me. And of course, here is Zones. So these are fantastic. There are some other ones that I don't have. Nervasystem had released a few other singles. There's Formasi Voices, and of course the Stardust EP on Matsuri. I don't have those. I just have these ones. But I'd like to. What I wanted to do was preface this video talking about what's going on with those, because I want to get to this right here. This is the first Nervasystem album, and it was released. Can you hear me? It was released on Sean Process's label. Sean Process being Process, Sean Williams, Process Productions in 2002. Kind of a long time after those 12 inches there. Interesting. Could have had a release on another label such as Flying Rhino, Psychedelic, or Matsuri, but opted not to do that because Nervasystem has always been such a very fiercely independent artist. Decided to go independent in spite of the pressure to release a album, a dance floor album, or an album otherwise on those other major labels that were corking out Psytrance and Goa at the time. Hence the progenation of Electric Orgasm. So took a while, you know, but this finally came out in 2002. And I want to talk about this in particular because this is, oh, that's crazy. You can see the reflection. Anyway, there. This album is really interesting and distinctive. And it is not a dance floor album. It is not a Goa floor psytrance stomper. There's a couple of, excuse me, full-on kind of psychedelic tracks on here. But as a whole, this album is a narrative into some pretty heavy, serious madness. And again, like these 12 inches I talked about before, not your typical verse-chorus verse style either. Again, more linear narratives that are consistent throughout, of course, with breakdowns and some stops, but picking right back up into the drive. These 12 inches are like a huge throttling giant psychedelic truck barreling down the road and chasing you. That's not really what's happening here. You know, the couple of stompers that are on here do that. You know, like prank, and they would be Prankster and Merkaba Mechanics, Merkaba Mechanics, which are fantastic. But they are, this album to me, let me just turn the page here on my notes. These go from up tempo to mid tempo to breaks in a very dark, uncertain, yet playful and trippy manner. A very trippy world. You know, this is some real interesting psychedelic shit right here. It goes all over. You know, there's jazzy guitar riffs with breaks, you know, and trippy bass lines and lots of effects that harken to like this crazy fusion of Future Sound of London and eat static or hallucinogen, classic dark techno with loads of atmosphere, loads of it. This is very heavy and very interesting and very unique and very it's so distinctive and strange. It's almost too much. And I only say that it's almost too much in that it's just so good at getting inside your head and wiggling around the earworm. It makes these little tunnels like it. I mean, I've already listened to so much psychedelic music in my life that my head is literally Swiss cheese. When I listen to something like this, it affects me even now, and it could almost be considered experimental in a way in the tone that this album delivers, because it's I'm going to go ahead and say that it's very avant-garde. It's not typical. This is not a dance floor filler. Maybe people were expecting a dance floor rocking, driving, fun, dancey album, and this is not what he gave us. Not like the Electric Orgasm 12 inches, which are dark, driving, and even though they're very deep, they are danceable. Absolutely, they're danceable, and that is not what's going on with this. I think that he was, trying to give us more of a psychedelic experience instead of just giving us music to dance to. And when artists do that, that's noteworthy. That shows talent. That shows skill, and that shows not taking for granted your audience either. There's almost nothing worse. I'm going to set this down for a moment. There's almost nothing worse when an artist blatantly disregards their audience. I mean, you could go on YouTube and look at slews of movie reviews from Watch Mojo to Looper, and watch the ones where they talk about how the reasons that this movie or that movie just bombed is because they're disrespecting the audience by insulting our intelligence. And I guess the flip side of that could be that when you listen to things like this, almost like when I talked about Coxbox, Dragon Tales, that if you're just used to low-hanging fruit that's handed to you on a tray, that's just easy to grab, easy to ingest, and easy to, there's no deeper level cognition involved into deciphering or deconstructing the music, and you listen to something like this, you will be disappointed because you have very low expectations. And I'm sorry, and that's most people. This whole thing is like a psychedelic cinematic horror show soundtrack. And I don't mean scary. I shouldn't say horror. I should say dark psychedelic psychedelic experience. Did I just say psychedelic 3 times? It's an intended head trip is what this is. That's what's going on with this. And, it literally fills your head up with madness and charm. It's unexpected. It takes these strange turns. And it's like a low-lit head shop with dreadlocks, scary bongs, and black lights. And it's just this, fusion of different sounds and different musical sensibilities that catch you off guard. And it's very unexpected and very avant-garde. Avant-garde, of course, meaning going against the grain, doing something fiercely independent, doing something else than what the status quo is quirking out, and in which the status quo would manifest a whole lot of people's expectations. Again, this is an album that gives you something to think about. This album is a journey. It's a narrative. It goes up, it goes down, it goes sideways, and it's very wonky, and it's very satisfying too. And I'm sorry I said cinematic horror, but when I listen to this, it's a bit scary, because it's very dark, there's not a whole lot of light in here. There's bits of light, like black light though, especially with the things like the guitars and the crazy breakdowns and all those crazy swirling effects that are going on in this thing. It is absolutely a psychedelic head trip, and at the time, from what I understand, when Nervasystem was doing stuff like this, there was a lot of pressure from the major labels to put out a dance floor album. And was there ever really a dance floor album or an album by Nervasystem that was more like this? Yeah, in the recent times, he put out an album which, along with Nervasystem 3, I want to say it was Brain Radio, but again, I have to apologize. I just started firing up Lost again. I've been sucked into watching Lost. So I just sort of jumped into this video today. But we had to wait quite a while to listen to and get in our hands an album that was more like this kind of stuff. If he had released an album that was all this kind of stuff, it probably would have been great, However, what would have come, if he had done that, if Nervasystem had done that and then given us this after, people might have went, oh, well, what's this then? Which one of these is more definitive Nervasystem, right? And I'm going to go ahead and say that both of these are. Because both of these, this and these, they complement each other quite well, right? This is the more driving side of this. This is the more experimental side of this. And it makes sense to me, He's good at doing both. He's good at giving us both driving mental madness and avant-garde experimental mental madness as well. And, if you want to have a dark psychedelic art party, put this on, Put this on and listen to it and force yourself to listen to it. It will open your mind. You don't need drugs to listen to this shit. You don't. I mean, if you get stoned, great. I wish you luck. But you don't need drugs to listen to this at all. This is going to do it for you without anything else. And again, I have to give credit to Nervasystem for putting this out, because this was very brave, and Process Productions only put out 2 releases. Of course, the first one being One Drop or Two, which was Process's first album, and then this is CD2. As far as Discogs tells me that there was only 2 releases, One Drop or Two and 13 Amp Fusion. So it was a label that didn't last very long. And of course, Process is still around. Nervasystem is still around. He was involved in some of those Prana remixes that came out a few years back. A lot of those old Prana hits were sort of revamped and remixed by other people, and he did a really good job with that. That's some of the only recent remixes that I would find relevant for the times. Oh, I thought the thing was over. Well, at any rate, I'm going to end the video here because the thing is flashing at me. Nervasystem